Hello, everybody. We are back with the boys of Ohio. It is, we're kicking off a new month. I guess it's technically June 1st, right? It is plowing, I guess, for late spring. That sounds about right.
Yeah, it's late spring, and my daughter's cooking lunch, which is why you hear the fire smoke alarm. I hear some giggles. Work from home we're recording, man. We're going through it.
So,
I know it's just a bagel, so I'm okay. I don't need to evacuate.
so I'd love to tell you that that is the first fire alarm on this podcast, but that would be a lie. We have had
Yeah.
we have had other fire alarms go off. It is a tried and true tradition. I'm not editing that out
Nope.
because people need to know that this is as real as it gets.
We have the adult nanny, the two kids. I'm not, child endangering, so trust me, it's mostly safe up here in the 614.
Well, Rick, we have gotten a couple questions in, but I do want to kick one thing off that has been in the news recently that I think could be important to IT pros. Microsoft is bringing GUI support and GPU acceleration to the Windows subsystem for Linux. If that makes you happy, that should be arriving here in the near-ish future. Rick, I'm curious, do you use Linux at all, or even the subsystem for Linux and what you do?
So I don't use the Microsoft subsystem. I have stayed Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
with the window manager there and the GUI there. In fact, on the computer I'm talking to you, I have a funny story about this computer actually. I run Hyper-V on Windows 10,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking over here at the book. A lot of you don't know that when Windows 8 introduced Hyper-V,
Mm-hmm.
I was on the team that wrote the book called Configuring Windows 8. I wrote the Hyper-V chapter. So I've always had a special
Oh, nice.
virtualization love for Windows built in,
Mm-hmm.
as well as Hyper-V, but for the desktop Windows. But anyways, I run Ubuntu on this computer, and like that's been my Linux jam on the desktop. Now in the data center, I have Ubuntu regular virtual machines. So I very much spend, I won't over exaggerate it, but I'll say probably 10%, 5 to 10% of my compute cycles of what I do are on Linux. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I am mostly a Windows person, but it's Ubuntu. I've just gotten to know that platform. So that's been my biggest issue to switch. In fact, on the Ubuntu system, I do Microsoft Teams. Right. So when you see that the Windows subsystem for Linux is going to introduce a GUI, well, that potentially can make a little bit more of an interesting situation around running Teams and
Mm-hmm.
everything you can do through Office 365 through a browser. So I think this is actually a relatively significant move. I don't know if, um, you know, I should probably do a Linux day, like a whole
Mm-hmm.
day exclusively on Linux, because I have Chrome, I
Yeah.
have Teams app, I could do anything for most of my Veeam work there, including a
Yep.
lot of my lab work, right? I use a technology that displays over HTML5 even. So, I can be fully productive. Now, I haven't gone so far, Brad, but if you were looking at this setup here on the desk, you could see that the potential is there. I haven't gone so far as to take this one computer in front of me, behind you,
Mm.
to be natively Linux on the device, right? I've really made a
Oh, okay.
habit of virtual machines Linux, right? Whether it's VMware or Windows Hyper-V role. So that would be an interesting next step if I put Linux natively on the device. But there is this, I don't know if the ninth computer of the household, that device is a candidate to be a Linux device, right? So, because it's also different when you're using it as a virtual platform. The networking's different, and you can kind of escape the guest to go do native things. But the moment I commit to the platform and go on it, that would be an interesting moment, right? But this is a big deal, I think. And then if you take the other part of that news of the GPU acceleration, there's a lot that could come with that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from video services to I don't know about Linux gamers. I don't know about that. I don't know if that's a market. That's just not an area I have expertise in. But it becomes a real citizen contender on the device. And I've long said that the device doesn't matter, right? So if you give me a Windows of any type device, Android devices, iPad, I can kind of function in almost any way.
Mm-hmm.
Android phones, and I used to I spent a long time with a Windows computer, an iPad tablet, and an Android phone, and I'd have a similar app experience across all three, right? So now that we're looking at what Microsoft's doing with Linux capabilities, the subsystem for Linux, you're actually like really upping the game. And I've just been really happy in the last couple of years of what they've done. SQL on Linux, the subsystem for Linux, it doesn't surprise me, but it really kind of folds into the bigger part of endpoint devices and such. So this is a good milestone. A lot of
Yeah.
oh boy, a lot of opinions. Don't get me so early on Mondays.
I was thinking through as you were talking, like, could I switch to Linux? And I actually think the answer is probably absolutely not. And it's not because Linux isn't good. Like, for productivity tasks, it'd be fine. The challenge would be, one, this podcast box uses a lot of very specific software that I guess if it's available on Linux, it could work. But there's about 4 apps that I would absolutely have to have available. And then on my desktop rig, the one challenge would be video editing, because I edit a lot of video. And I don't know if Adobe Premiere is on Linux, and I don't know what the perf is like. So that would represent a pretty big
Yeah, so
challenge.
in that sense, I had no idea, Brad, you were such a creative type. But in that sense, you might have some significant relearning, potentially limited
Yes.
capabilities. In my example, where I spend most of my day, the lab, Lookout, email, I call it Lookout, not Outlook, Word and OneDrive, that stuff's gone very browser centric, so I bet I could do the full day on Linux. And it's like some people when they switch to a Mac or back to a PC, that type of transition is probably a little bit softer than a Linux window manager to Windows desktop, those types of experiences. But might be a good learning experience, or make a blog post or a rant tweet at least out of it, if it doesn't go well.
Yeah, this transitions actually nicely into my next question that actually comes in from a reader, Mr. Alto, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, writes in with a question for you, Rick. And he says, I am interested in building out a home lab, but the problem is hardware is expensive, licensing is expensive, and I don't have tens of thousands of dollars to replicate even a small subset of what we have at work. What does Rick recommend, or is there an easier path?
So, Alto, first of all, you just missed a great opportunity about a month or two ago. I gave away my old lab. And now, best way to do it was I just tweeted out, hey, and I had a blog post. Here's my old lab. It was a Dell server, and I had a storage device, and basically the first people that emailed me. So the timestamp of my email service was the
Yep.
judge. Only thing was they had to send me a shipping label, and I keep all the original boxes for this
Oh,
very
nice.
reason. I've got the space here. So, but anyways, so be on the lookout if anybody's pawning off gear. So the gear is the first discussion. And in that, you might want to look on eBay, Craigslist, those types of things. Facebook Marketplace, great way to find local. So your shipping cost is, not existent. You just have to go get it or meet somebody. Use gear, you're going to get so much more value out of it. And then on the other side, I would be remiss if I didn't recommend using free tiers in the clouds. Okay, so if you could find those free tiers, I think Azure and Amazon would be really important to be part of your learning journey, home lab as well, because it should not be on-prem only in 2020. So next step, what about free? What about low-cost lab solutions? So I'm actually going to tell you something that I do in the Veeam lab that I think would be really fitting for home, and I use Windows Server 2019 evaluation media. Now, it sounds crazy, but that's just that. It's evaluation media. Now, you get 180 days to use it, but there's 2 things. One, you can reset it, and I do believe that's within the terms of service. And then secondly, you can rebuild it. So in the whole nature of a home lab, twice a year, you have to rebuild it. That's not too bad. Couple in things like, I know Veeam has a community edition for VMware and HyperV backup that's free to use for up to 10 virtual machines. So you have some backup options, right? And physical Windows and Linux agents can be backed up with that as well. So finding the free offerings isn't so bad. The Windows evaluation media is probably one of the more effective techniques. So one thing I could think about is HyperV on a server. And if you don't have Windows Server 2019 support on the device, you could think about Windows Server 2016. And then again, just run that evaluation media, rebuild it. And by the way, that's an opportunity to relearn. Like, loading the ISO and installing it is one task. But then maybe the next time you might want to do it through an automated fashion, right? So not just are you rebuilding your lab, but you're learning a skill. And in that situation, the evaluation media is actually very effective. And what I then do with the evaluation media, because I am always installing Veeam betas and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I just use the eval media. None of them last more than 3 or 4 months, but I have 180 days. So I think eval media is a good place to start. You can leverage the Hyper-V role. From a VMware perspective, there's the free hypervisor. So if you really want to learn VMware technologies, or at least keep that in the mix, the ESXi free edition is available, I believe still, but it doesn't have the central management. It doesn't expose a lot of the APIs that are used. So Alto, if I had to give you a recommendation, I think Windows evaluation media sits as gotta have it, whether it's your guest virtual machine or additionally your hypervisor. If you really want VMware learning in the mix, the only kind of challenge is that the free hypervisor doesn't really take you to that next level. The management that comes with the you can get evaluations of vCenter server, appliance, etc. That'll expose all those other advanced features, but it's not as timeless as the evaluation media, right? So that's a lot of answers without any specifics, but the evaluation media is probably the most underrated, low-cost technique for Windows Server Hyper-V technologies learning.
No, that's good advice. I mean, if somebody's really trying to do that budget thing and just trying to learn different platforms, that's absolutely the way they should go. Why go any other route?
Right. So Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Craigslist for a good deal on kit, evaluation media, and cloud tiers that are free. There you go.
All right, Rick. Now we're gonna mince some words. I'm sure you're gonna anger some people with this next question.
Okay.
So another just want to say question of the universe came in because this person did not give permission to use their name.
Sweet.
VMware or Hyper-V, which is what's your baby? Where are you going? What do you recommend? What's your thoughts on the two competing platforms, and how do you proceed?
So the reality is, oh man, it kills me to say this. I don't know if it does matter, but I'll tell you this: if you look at Hyper-V and you look at Windows Server 2019, and we kind of didn't really get a lot of new innovation there. I'll be completely transparent.
Yep.
Whereas VMware and vSphere as a platform is doing a lot of interesting things. I think we're getting to the point where Hyper-V is going to stay around forever because it's just so easy. It's built in, and it has what is needed for many environments. But for larger deployments, the enterprise feature set for vSphere just cannot be, challenged. It has so many capabilities. Now, that being said, I couldn't design a modern data center without any Microsoft technologies. I don't think that's possible, even if it's just at the simplest level, identity management with Active Directory and Azure AD. But then the Windows guest OSs and enterprise apps like SQL, you just can't avoid those. So I think that, it's always been an interesting conversation between those two. And, there used to be other, hypervisor platforms up in the mix, but I can find use cases for both. Like that lab question from Alto, there's a simple answer. That's Hyper-V for what is being asked about it. That might work in retail and robo. I've talked to a lot of, there's a large retailer that you and I both know very well. In the back of every store is a Hyper-V host with 2 VMs on it. But in the data center, they're VMware. And for very specific reasons, it's that way. So it really depends. And then you're like me with this laptop I'm talking to you on. I'm going to tell you a funny story about it. Our chief legal I shouldn't say that, but our let's just say somebody in our legal department wanted a really powerful laptop. Got to have the best. And so this laptop has 32 gigs of RAM, and it's 2 years old. So it was a pretty
Yeah.
good unit at the time, and it even has a 10 key for the full number panel. But then the individual took one trip and it was too big, so they sent it back. And so our IT has this model that they don't use. And I love hanging out at IT because you get some interesting little chitter chatter sometime. And they're
Yep.
like, well, Rick, do you want this one? Because we're not going to reissue it. And I'm like, yes, I will take this one. This is now my at-home work computer, which in current conditions has been more more clutch than ever. I love the 32 gigs of RAM and the big screen, but I never use it as a laptop, right? So that's finishing the loop of that first point without directly answering your question, Brad. For that very reason, I did not want to answer it. So.
Yeah. So it's I have a it's not a perfect theory or thought process when I come to some of these things, and I, like Rick, will take the high road and not fully recommend either, because I think in certain scenarios HyperV is just better because it's just there if you just need something simple. But if it's a mission critical feature that is going to keep your company online and operating, there is value to be had in paying a specific company for a very specific feature, because if that specific feature fails, you can call them up. If Hyper-V fails, good luck calling Microsoft and getting a hold of the Hyper-V support line like you could over at VMware.
I don't know if that's a little too harsh, Brad. I think that Hyper-V can be supported pretty well
Yeah, that is true.
by the Windows team. But one thing I'll say that makes a big difference is VMware's made an incredible investment with vSAN.
Yeah.
Their virtual storage technology. And I know that in 2018, there was a episode of Enterprise Dish that was recorded at VMon where Duncan Epping came on, and
Yes.
he's one of the experts there. You know, even then, it was so amazing. And what they're doing now with vSAN, that's a significant difference maker. So if somebody, needs, a storage solution that comes from the hypervisor, which is kind of something you may not come to the hypervisor decision for, that's really compelling. In fact, we use vSAN in the lab. Veeam fully supports it. In fact, has special logic for backups of it. And it's a great part of, a storage strategy, right? So when that's a difference-making technology, okay? I'm not necessarily going to be able to compare it to Storage Spaces Direct, but Storage Spaces has a story as well. But I kind of think that, vSAN functions a little bit differently now with some of the new services it's adding, and that might be kind of an additional part of the decision on which platform.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. I think there's at the end of the day, there's no perfect answer for everybody. You can't look at it and say everybody should absolutely do this, because everybody's scenarios are going to be unique, and weighing and valuing what is important to you is obviously going to be the deciding factor on which technology stack you go with.
Agreed.
So Rick, as we wrap it up here, anything else going on? Obviously up in the Columbus area, everything else going happy, healthy, and still working
happy,
from home?
Healthy, beautiful, beautiful weather last couple of weeks. I've been riding the bike, but you may make it think that I'm not doing anything. It's beautiful weather and riding a bike, but no, I'm focusing on the final push for VMon.
That's right.
And it's going to be the 17th and 18th online experience VMon this year, so you can register for free. So anyone that's watching this, you're welcome to join. We've got great tips on ransomware, great previews to some new capabilities from Veeam. We've got some best practices, worst practices type of stuff for our GA products, but a 2-day event. And, come and go as you can, but definitely it's going to be, that's the big thing I'm working on.
Sounds like a winner. And that's the 17th and 18th, you said? We'll make sure to include links down on the post on Petri below for all that. So people who
didn't even have to look, I remember those dates.
They're probably burned into the back of your head at this point, much like the bagel in your kitchen. To bring it full circle. All right, Rick. Well, we very much appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. And to everybody else, hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch all of you right back here next time.